Hello, hello.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mayo Agency Podcast. Giovanni here. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Philip here,
Hi.
right? My partner friend. We're here again. And then we've got special guest today, Conrad Ruiz. We're going to be talking about a few things today, mainly focused on time management, right? And anything else of value that Conrad may wanna include in there as well that will be of value for this conversation. Me, Philip, and Conrad have connected for a while now. Conrad will do his introduction now, so you'll get to know a bit more about him. But yeah, go ahead, Conrad. Do a brief introduction so people can get to know more about you, a bit of your background to provide more context, and then we get into the conversation.
Thank you, Gio. Filip, guys, always grateful to see you. I know it's always too long since we last connect. Hi, everyone. My name is Conrad Ruiz. I am the founder of Well Aware, and I love time management. I run a consulting firm that is specifically dedicated to buying back people's time. And the reason why I care so much about this is as a 27-year-old, my father is 96. And for him and I growing up, there's always been a conversation around time and, frankly, how uncertain we have left of it. I really endeavored throughout my earlier years as an adolescent to try and understand just one, how much time my dad and I had left, and two, what I could do with that time to make him happy, proud, as well as myself, right? And long story short, I ended up having some of my own health complications. I've ended up having my own experiences lead me towards wanting to feel like I'm at a race against the clock, just within my own personal health, let alone my family and the time that I wanted to spend with them. And it all led to a very a very overwhelming set of expectations. And I think one thing that I really related back to at the end of it all was that I started to learn that everyone else has this similar sense of, we have no time today. We have to do a bunch of things before tomorrow. And it's always a race against the clock. And it's just not a good way to live. At the end of the day, it's just, I almost felt the ironies of my world being around. I used to study biomedical engineering. That's how I got started. That's where a lot of my health problems were sort of guiding me towards. And it seems silly when you're working so hard to the point that your health starts to deteriorate when the very nature of your efforts are regarding health in and of themselves. So Well Aware became this function of taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture, and trying to understand what matters most with time. And ironically enough, that came to a conversation around, well, what does it mean to manage one's own time? And how do you even think about that, especially when you're stuck in the middle of, being super busy and you have a lot of responsibilities, you've got commitments on the personal side, the professional side. And at the end of the day, you sort of try to ask yourself, it's like, well, am I even organized enough to have these kinds of conversations? And I'll tell you, it's a really funny answer sometimes, but I digress. Again, Gio, Philip, grateful to be here. Excited to dive right into it.
No, thank you, Conrad. Great introduction, and great introduction into understanding the importance of time and sort of giving that context into why for you it's been so important in business, your personal life, and sort of giving us that context of both sides. So a lot of our audience is right, business owners, consultants, founders. So why don't we start off with, in terms of time management? I think one of the main points that a lot of people can struggle with are the time wasters, like identifying time wasters, right? So why don't you roll us through like the importance of identifying and addressing activities that basically aren't productive. We sometimes think they're productive because we feel like we're doing something, and that whole, right, what they say is some people feel like they're busy, but then busy isn't the same thing as actual being productive. So maybe we address and identify some of those activities. Some of them may be, right, procrastination, or 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 unnecessary emails, right, when you could be just calling somebody directly, or reaching out to them in a different way so that you don't have to send an email, etc. So why don't we roll through that, the identifying time wasters?
Yeah, I'll try to go through maybe like three layers of awareness for this. Is a lot of what I try to do in my line of work is beyond just buying time operatively and saying like, here's the way to get this time away from you, or here's, to your point, Giovanni, here's a way to get this done faster, smarter, more effectively. I think there are sort of these awareness components that we need to have. And I try to call out to like Well-Aware's philosophies around awareness management within time management. So the three things that I'm going to recognize around procrastination, wasting time, sort of falling out of step with productivity, I think you're hitting on the first concept, which is like, am I even doing something that matters? And I think that's a really interesting question, especially if you're an early stage consultant, an early stage founder, or you're a business owner who's finding yourself with a ton of things on your plate. You have to start asking this really hard question, which is, do I even know what's productive for my time? And in that perspective, you have to ask, amongst the things that I know are productive, do I even know what's the most productive thing to do with my time? And am I okay with, whether it's emotionally or, from a commercial responsibility to the nature of your business, am I able to accept the consequences of prioritizing one thing over the other? Because I find that to be one of the biggest issues that people have. It's like they feel like they need to be busy so that they can somewhat sustain everything. And I say somewhat, and I put sustain with a really harsh asterisk at the end of the day, because I do think there's a lot of unsustainability in the way that people try to, manage everything. And so you have to kind of take that first step and realize, like, can I do what matters most? Do I know what matters most? And am I willing to accept the consequences of what it means to not focus on those other things? Sometimes it's just a personal beef you have to have, where you have to just go like, listen, I'm doing the thing that matters. And by saying yes to this, I automatically, like naturally, I have to say no to everything else. I can't cook dinner and take a shower at the same time.
Exactly.
You have to think about some, like, it's like, I put in a ridiculous element to it, because some people really try to do, everything at once. And I think there's an anxiety around that needs to be resolved. And that's kind of where that second layer is, of just like, what's the emotional impact of what's going on behind the nature of your time wasting and lack of productivity. Are you being busy because there's something that you're trying to fulfill within yourself? I heard this yesterday, and it was at a webinar where one of my clients was present. I was like, dude, you really need to listen to this. The webinar host basically said, you have to understand if you're doing something because it makes you feel fulfilled, even if it's not truly productive. You have to come to terms with that. It could be shocking if you don't want to accept that, if you want to be in a denial state. And that's hard. I understand that. Maybe the most productive thing for you to do at that point is to seek whatever form of menial therapy you need in order to resolve that issue before you can move on. Maybe that's just a call to meditation. I don't know. Depends on who you are. And so the last thing from there is, okay, let's actually start talking tactically. Giovanni, your point is astute. Is this an email or is this a phone call? Okay, do you have a problem with making phone calls? I know folks who are afraid of picking up the phone. Are you addressing something that costs $5 an hour? What's your time worth? 100. We have a problem. Right? There are very simple measurements that you can take that can help you understand. And maybe you don't know all the measurements, maybe you don't know what's the cheapest way to do something, or maybe, part of your discomfort with going, I know I need to do it this way, but I don't like doing it that way. Okay, cool. Maybe you don't like doing it. Maybe someone else likes doing it. I'm sure there's someone else out there that likes doing it. I mean, if you could afford them, that's great. So those measurements, what's the opportunity cost? Literal dollars. How much time does it take someone else to do it, or some software, some tool? If you're not aware that these things exist, ask around. Say, hey, I'm trying to get a particular function or an operation complete. This is my budget. My literal budget is I have an hour to do this every day, and I hate doing it. Can someone else do it for that hour? Can I then take that hour and put it somewhere else that's going to be more valuable for my time? That's the math that really brings you back to, once you've gotten past the anxiety portion, once you've gotten past the, have I figured out what matters most? that I think is your best bet for getting to a tactical solution of like, all right, here's what's next. I've got to hire this person. I've got to pay for this software. I've got to do this in a way that that just makes the most sense for me. And I've got to block out the time from everything else because none of the other stuff matters.
I like that. No, I like that. Yeah, because you have to basically identify, so be self-aware. And then once you're self-aware, you have to then, I like what you said, like the measurement aspect, right? The metrics, understand the metrics. Because at the end of the day, in order for you to identify and address, you have to measure, right? That's all a part of it, like what you're saying, because I can't identify something if I'm not measuring, right, my activities and then being able to compare. And that's when you can identify and then address the issues, right? When you go, okay, how does my day look? What am I actually investing my time in? And is this productive? And then you go through it, hour by hour or task by task, like you said, and then you're able to identify that, okay, wait a second, I don't like this. Yet, is this important? Is this a priority? Is this going to help move the business forward and something that I have to focus on? Or can somebody else actually do this, or a software or a person? And then they can do that while I focus on this, which is actually something I like, or something that I, as a founder, have to focus on to make sure things move forward in the right direction. So, yeah, what are your thoughts, Philip?
I'll mention one thing. Both of you already heard from me. I'm a big advocate, and my big mantra is do what you do the best and pay for the rest. The point is, when we're talking about time management overall and being aware of the scenario, the challenges, the problems, opportunity costs, and everything, it helps me remind when I was starting business, I was from always available, switching to D&D, meaning almost never available, with adequate time slots for doing what is right to do. And that is driving us towards the important thing. And definitely I want to hear from your end, Conrad, more. And that is clear goals and priorities. That is important. That is the secret sauce and highly important parameter to not dissect, but set up entire sustainable environment, the ecosystem which supports you personally and guiding you towards the work-life balance and overall helping and supporting your business endeavor if you're an entrepreneur striving forward.
Yeah. I think what's critical in that process, because I think what some people try to define is, I need a clear goal, I need a clear vision. I'm like, you need a clear workflow. I think you need a very clear process. I think you need to know what you're doing and how that's supposed to get to your results. And everyone talks about how you're supposed to, love the process. Don't love what it drives. I mean, measure what it drives and determine if that's going to be sustainable for you given what you're trying to accomplish. But you got to love the process at the end of the day. It has to be sustainable for you. I think from there, one of the sort of sub processes, or I like to call them meta tasks or meta processes that you need to do, is you need to be conscious to sit down and spend time on looking at the time. So I think, Gio, when you address that whole point of like, you got to look at yourself every day and you have to self-reflect. You have to have enough awareness consciously, I'd say. I think we all have the awareness. It's just whether or not we're conscious at any given moment. Which happens, it comes and goes. We can't be fully focused all the time. That would cost a lot on us. We need to feel comfortable being able to measure as a workflow, even at the smallest scales, so that we can then try to come to a better understanding of, okay, how does this tie back to your point, Filip, the clarity of what I'm trying to accomplish and the clarity of what my roadmap is towards getting there. And again, if you're new to this, if there are things you don't know, it's going to be challenging because you're practically guessing sometimes if you're just not familiar. And so maybe that call to action says, study somewhat or be prepared to try and fail and be prepared to do so in a way that's public enough that the people that surround you that know, like, and trust you and vice versa can give you context of their awareness and what they've gone through. And so, stand on the shoulders of your fellow giants and make that process a little bit faster. Because I think at the end of the day, we still get caught up in this mindset of, I'm not moving fast enough. I'm not failing fast enough. I'm not succeeding fast enough. I'm not fast. And the real thing is people are saying it's not enough. I'm not enough. And that, I think, is forgive me for going a little off topic on the question of goals, but to me, that was the one goal that I really wanted to establish. That was the whole well awareness reality for me. Was like, oh my God, I'm constantly facing a battle of conversation where I'm not enough every day. And that's not helping me get anywhere.
Yeah, good point.
No, that's it. Yeah, I like that. I think yeah, you touched on some of the main points there in terms of, right, we talk again about self-awareness, right? And having to be very self-aware of where you're at now. And I think one of the big points you said there is that clarity when the goal setting and understanding what's a priority in the business. I think it comes a lot of times with experience. Like you said, if you're newer, it's going to come with experience. But then the other hack, the way I see it is like a hack, is the mentors. I think that's where a big part of mentorship comes in. Having the right people around you, like you said, the right mentor that maybe has had that skin in the game, right? Those years in business, in that same kind of industry that you're in, or a similar industry, and can, right, has that skin in the game, so that when you do come to these points of, okay, what should I be prioritizing now to hit this right goal? What should I be focusing on in the short term versus midterm versus long term? I think the mentors are probably one of the biggest assets in this specific field of like goal setting and prioritizing. Because like you said, sometimes you may not know. You may, like you said, you may just be projecting, right? You make projections based on the experience you have. But if you don't have a lot of experience, then how are you going to make the right projections, right? And that's where I think the mentors become crucial. What are your thoughts, Philip?
Absolutely agree. Because in worst case scenario, mentors are there to help you and support you in shortening the learning process. So in smaller portion of time, you'll reach the desired state or goals. Definitely. And in the end, everything is a two-way street. No matter the mentor, for example, has much more business experience than the person he's mentoring, for example, but still, learning is a two-way street. So people are that way helping and supporting each other. And Conrad said, you have your ecosystem, relevant people and sources with whom you share the challenges, the problems, the issues, whatever, and you are helping and supporting each other and together strive and move forward. And that is very important, because everything is in the end in symbiosis. We cannot do things on our own. We can do a lot of things, but you're top capping entire potential. The point is, in symbiosis, you can achieve so much more with like-minded people. And that is important to mention and emphasize there.
Yes, that is a good point, Philip. And also another thing I wanted to discuss in this conversation with you, Conrad, is moving on to the next step, right? Because we've already covered the time wasters, setting the goals, priorities, which we just spoke about now. I think a good follow-up to the conversation and what we've talked about so far is now going into the planning phase, right? So we've got the goals, we've got the priorities, etc. But now we have to put things into motion and start to take action. And a lot of that comes from the planning and the scheduling. So why don't we talk about some techniques that you've used to help you with that? I know there's some, like, people use, like me, for example, use time blocking. I think time blocking has been a big tool for me. It's helped me out tremendously in terms of when, especially I have like different initiatives going on at the same time. Time blocking helps me like really stay focused. It's like, okay, this block of time, I have to focus just on this. Because if not, you sort of get distracted when you have a lot of priorities in the day. So time blocking has been a big one for me. And obviously having always a to-do list, which helps with the, time blocking. But then the to-do list helps me within that time block. What am I going to be focused on? And what's that priority? What's that list of things that must get done? And then what are things that, if they get done, it's great, but they're not the priority. That's sort of what some of the things that I've done to help with that. What are your thoughts on that, Conrad?
I've seen so many tricks. One of my favorites in the to-do list world is to have an open to-do list and a closed to-do list. The closed to-do list is just a list of 10 things You can't add to that list unless you take care of something on that list. And that close to-do list is comprised of all the things that you've identified as the most valuable things to spend your time on. From there, you can keep an open list where you can document everything that you want to do, should do, feel like doing, could be priority, could be not. But the point is, every time you need to go through this matrix of studying your close to-do list and, resolving that each day, then when there's space opened up by the nature of those things being accomplished, you can go ahead and look at the open to-do list and figure out, again, what matters. When it comes to time blocking, one of my favorite things to do, and I know I found this so fascinating when I started working with people, and I'd ask them, hey, could you share your screen? I want to see your calendar. And I just see these swaths of emptiness, or I would see these swaths of blocks that I think are great, but it's all this monochrome color, right? It's almost as if like they've just never gone and even explored the fact that they can change the color settings within their Google Calendar, which I'm like, hey, I'm the weirdo that's deciding to, check out every nook and cranny of that software. But, well, I care a lot about time. So I'll tell people, like, if they don't time block, to your point, Johnny, time block, like, please, like, check out your to-do list, check out the responsibilities you have, check out how your time is going to flow throughout the day. Like, think about, amidst the commercial things that you got to do for your business, what do you got to do personally? You got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to exercise. Like, hopefully you can account for those things as well. Those can also be time blocked. And I try to say, with time block in particular, whether or not you're getting started or you're someone who's really gotten into the field of it, integrity is something that compounds over time. The more you commit to your time blocks, the more you continue to do so. It's a fascinating positive power of momentum and emotion, because it really establishes, like, again, what we talked about before we even started recording, this idea of having integrity. It's one thing to do it with others; it's nothing to do with yourself. And in that perspective, I think time blocking can be something that for some people, when they start, they get a little bit nervous. They're like, oh my God, I need to, like, really meticulously block out everything. And and I'm like, dude, reality is going to come at you fast. And you may not get to everything exactly the way you intended. In fact, I can guarantee you reality will not meet your expectations. Things will happen that are outside of your accountability of schedule. And so that's fine. So be more flexible, be more open, provide buffer times, let things breathe so that you can switch them up and change accordingly. But still, capture that, recognize that information again, be mindful of the meta task of time reflection and review, and sort of look at how you thought things were going to go versus how they did, and readjust your integrity for tomorrow accordingly. But then the last thing amidst all of those things is, if you can batch your times, if you can recognize what each of your different time blocks are going to be reflective on, maybe you have different categories of life that you'd like to describe. Like I'll say that just within the business world alone, there are 3 main types of categories that I could have. I could have times where I'm doing creative work. Maybe I can boil that down into creative work that's like creating value for my clients. So I'm doing direct service delivery, or it's creating value for my network via making introductions, or creating content that I'm going to then share and publish and post. So maybe those all get a certain color category for them. You could literally just right click on any block. If you're using Gmail, I think Outlook as well, you could just right click and just give that a particular color category. And then let's say for your speculative endeavors, maybe for the things that you do to prospect new clients, new providers, new tools, new studies, things that you're exploring, you're speculating opportunities. Maybe that gets its own color category. And then finally, other different types of activities, like I have review, administration, payroll, managing the process of my business. I could consider that
back end, like the back end stuff.
Back end, exactly. So call it what you want, but put those calendar blocks on based on what's important. Again, going back to that prioritization element. And then just put the color coding elements down, because it's kind of nice to be able to see and understand, like, where your general headspace is going to be. Like, our brain likes to compartmentalize. There are tricks to that process around getting a lot of different things done, where it's really, you're trying to keep everything within certain themes. That eases your brain function a lot. And so as a result, being able to see how those colors change, you can maybe decide differently how you're going to time block and which things you're going to do when. I've seen people batch whole days, let alone whole weeks, toward a particular theme.
Great. No, I like that. That overall, a lot of great points you shared there. Just one thing I wanted to emphasize out of those points that you brought was, one of the things that I've recently learned and I'm starting to be a lot more assertive in that area, is the mixture of what you said, like the personal with business. In the beginning, I was just time blocking the business stuff. Like, oh yeah, the business, it's important. I gotta make sure this gets done. But then I wasn't time blocking the personal life. And I think sometimes as entrepreneurs in the beginning, we're unrealistic with that. We say, no, we got to be focused on the business, make sure things go. But you got to be focused on your personal life as well. Because if you don't, then that gets out of balance, and it's going to eventually, that, those things that start to impact you negatively in your personal life will cross into the business.
Yeah.
And it's going to impact you, right? Either way. So you have to, in my opinion, is merge them. You have to merge that time blocking of your personal and business, so you see it all in one place, and you're like, okay, so I'm going to take a break for this personal thing within this time frame. So that means there's no business there. This is that I'm going for a walk, going to the gym, whatever people want to do. They want to meditate. Some people just want to, right? They do a lot of different things, but you take that personal time to do what you're going to read a book, read something, just relax, and then boom, you recharge, and then you come back and you're like, okay, once I finish this, I'm going back into this time block, which is for business, for this specific, right, category. So like you said, I think that's great, but that's one of the biggest things I could share, is that that's helped me out a lot to balance it out, because the reality is, in business, there is no exact work-life balance. You have to create that for yourself and determine that. It's not like going to be perfect. Like, oh yeah, you're going to have the perfect, like, no. I've noticed that in business, like you said, there's constant things changing, but you just have to find what's right for you. And I think doing it where you merge those two, your personal calendar, your personal life with your business life, you merge that together, it just makes it a lot more easier for you to be productive, versus trying to like totally separate those things and try to be, oh no, it's in business and business and personal life is separate. No, not really. I don't think that hasn't at least worked for me. I've seen that merging them together has actually helped me be more productive and not lose track in my personal life, and still stay on track and on the business side as well. What are your thoughts, Philip?
Yeah, I had several days ago one interesting conversation about that specific topic, and the guys were saying, there is no chance I will be mixing private schedule with my business schedule, and there is definitely not a chance that I will be putting my private life into a bracket or compartment. It's not about that. It's about organization. So you can release adequate amount of time for yourself, for your private life, for your family. That is the point. It's only a matter of being well organized. It doesn't mean that you are becoming a robot and transforming yourself to one. That is not the point. So people are still on some way, on some level, have a feeling of rejection towards that. But at the end of life, the point is, as you both mentioned, clear goals, expectations, work-life balance. So whatever tool is helping and supporting your plan and desired state, use it. It's simple, very simple in the end.
I think the conversation around feeling captured or feeling almost, to your point, robotic, Filip, around, why should I be managing my personal life like I manage my business? It's a personal development conversation. Do you feel like when you set expectations for your work life that you're able to adequately achieve them and process through them? Great. Why can't you use that same set of skills in your personal home? Why the hell do you even work in the first place? You work so you can have a personal life. Why not protect and organize that in a manner that, allows you to live it in the way that you want to? Maybe that living that way does mean kind of letting it be loose leaf and disorganized, but I've seen a lot of the folks who can make that claim, and then you look at what they choose to do, especially when they get into this realm of, certain days or certain cycles of their business that are just really, really busy or really, really overwhelming. And what do they end up doing? They say, oh man, I got so much done today. Now I'm going to go proceed to veg out for 4 hours because I'm so tired. I haven't eaten yet. And I need to go to bed late at night, but I'm going to stay up late because I still haven't had time to process everything that went on. So it's like, if you don't account for how those two worlds interact with one another and how you sort of spill in and out between those two, I think what we talk about, to your point, Giovanni, where it's like, it's not about balance. There's a harmony. You have to play these two songs and it's fine. I think sometimes within my world of time management, it ends up just looking like one big song because I don't know. I don't see so much of a separation. Granted, there's so much to be said about, again, that personal development side, at least for me, for my story, it all became all enrapturing. But the flip side of that, as I had experienced it and seen so many other people experience, is that if you don't make that context between those two spaces, you're going to find yourself disconnecting somewhere. You're going to find yourself unconscious. And I think, if anything, if there's one thing I've learned in particular, it's that I never get bothered by mistakes that I make that are done while in a conscious state of mind. I get really bothered by making mistakes when I'm in an unconscious state of mind, because I realize typically that consciousness may have been the only solution, or I've made that mistake before and I just wasn't conscious of when I did it last time. I forgot. I took on of all the things I took away from living in a fraternity. Jesus. They had this one, it was this one like workshop session that we had done. And I was like, of all the things that we spent time on, this actually was pretty valuable, but it was a very simple, like you had a 5x5 grid. And it was this classic example of everyone was formulating in a line, and the person in the front of the line had to figure out what was the correct path to get from one side of the grid to the other. And the purpose of the exercise was to, outside of like tactical, like remember things and tell your team like, hey, here's how you get through the box. Fun fact, you couldn't talk to the person once they entered the grid. They had to kind of go at it their own. And some of the less memorious folks really suffered. But anyway, my point being, we talked about the difference between a misstep and a mistake. When you go through the grid and you hit you're like 5 steps in and then you hit the wrong square and now you have to go start back from the beginning. It's one thing if that was the lesson. The lesson was figuring out that wasn't the right step. And so you have to go back and start again and get back to that, that place that you were originally, the first 5 right steps that you took. If you end up making that same misstep again, it's no longer a misstep. It's no longer a newfound lesson. It's a mistake. And how did you make that mistake? Probably because you weren't consciously present from when the last time you made that error. So it just becomes ever more important to have that presence. And that's how this whole situation comes in with, our day-to-day, personal, professional, these experiences that we have. We're just not conscious enough because we don't allow ourselves to be, because we gave ourselves too much work to do. So we stay busy. And as a result, we never sit down and think.
Wow, no, great comparison, Conrad. Yeah, that was a great comparison, a way to add context to that point. But let's go through one more point before then concluding our conversation, which has been very interesting so far. I want to go over the importance of, because I think this was going to be a big one for a lot of people, delegation. Yeah. I think that the art of delegation is probably one of the biggest abilities that an entrepreneur can develop, is that ability to be able to delegate correctly. So why don't we talk about that? How do you think about delegation and outsourcing, and to do that effectively?
Yeah, so just like anything else, right? This is a trial and error experience. Most people who get started with delegating suck at delegating. Congratulations. You probably sucked at something when you first started it. It's just another thing to learn. Now, where I think people get really caught up with delegation is the cost, because immediately they start to look at, well, how many dollars am I wasting each hour by having someone, even as cheap as $5, try to work with me and work for me. And I've heard so many stories about folks hiring assistants and then being like, oh man, I'm just not using this person correctly. Like I hired them because I needed the help, but then I didn't even get the help that I was intending to get in the first place. They didn't feel like they were making enough of it. Again, this concept of enough. When you're just getting started, it's okay. You're going to suck at delegating, and that's totally cool. Talk to other people about what you're getting accomplished. Let someone else look into your shoes. Let your assistant look into the shoes of like what you're trying to get accomplished, and let them watch you, because they're going to see that task and they're going to go, this person is doing it inefficiently. I'm not going to want to do it the way they do it. I only want to do it the way that makes my life easier. And if I can figure out how to make my life easier, great. I can get more of this task done. I can help, support. So you have to have an openness. You have to openness to process, and openness to operations. And then within that, you have to be, again, I go back to this sort of these different layers of awareness. You want to be mindful of the fact that it's not just this dollar cost of this other person that you're working with. It's your own time cost as well. Every hour you spend doing this task repeatedly over and over again is hours that you aren't going to be focusing on something else. And if you're the business owner, or if you're the founder, if you're the person in charge of anything, and you have to see the bigger picture, then that's your responsibility. Again, we look at the measurements and the costs. If we can talk about how you can sustain, what's your runway look like currently with the way that you're expending time and money in order to continue to do what you're doing? Okay, what does it mean for you to introduce an additional $5 an hour burn rate with someone? And what does that ultimately look like for you? What could that sustain if it works well? Set up the experiment and just ask yourself, like, okay, cool. Like if I gave this process a week, a month to just try this out, I bought 10 hours of time with someone. If I can get those 10 hours to be equated, at least somewhat, it doesn't have to be perfect. Everyone gets caught up in this other realm too, where it's like, oh, my VA or this person I delegated to, they have to do 100%, if not 120% of the job in the way that I'm doing it. It's like, nah, dude, settle for 70. Go for the average, because 70% of that hour back for you is still so significant. Yeah. And so get that done. I've even heard people say as much as like, if you need a job to get done at 120% of the value, hire 2 people that'll do it at 70. Because that'll basically average out those 2 people working in the same context as you. It's like, well, what about the cost? What about the cost? Again, just look at the math. If you're worth $100 an hour and hiring someone costs 5, 10, the margin on that is ridiculous. Yeah. Now I get it. Maybe, it's not a direct trade-off. You buy back that hour, but it's not like you can immediately put that hour into another extra $100 of service delivery work. Well, then we have to start having conversations around your marketing and sales process. And you probably talk to Filip and Giovanni, but you have to consider that just that boundary alone, just that distinction of range in terms of dollar cost, let alone time cost, it's more often than not going to be pretty significant, especially if you're in the world of being a business owner. You have to recognize that. And again, if you don't have that experience, get some mentors, talk to some friends, let them know how you're experiencing it. And you'd be surprised. Maybe it's not a $5 per hour cost. Maybe it's a 5 cents per hour, because it's software that's solving the issue for you. Again, the greatest VAs that are in charge of doing one very specific thing.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Filip. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Conrad about that respectable topic, because people are very often being focused on cost saving without looking that from the right perspective, as you mentioned. Will be cost cutting here, cost cutting there, cost cutting here, cost cutting there. And yeah, the mantra is cost cutting, not being productive and generating a true value and results which you actually want. And then afterwards, we didn't achieve this or we didn't achieve that. Whose responsibility that is? It's yours. It's yours. However you turn it around, it is always you. By all means and always you. In the end, if you're an entrepreneur, that is why you are in the role of business owner and whoever, meaning the executive. So you need to decide which route you want to go. Do you want to optimize everything until nothing is left to optimize, meaning the people nor the systems, nothing, until business perishes? Or you want to be productive and strive forward and do something what is meaningful? No matter you are using the software tools, or you're working with people who can help you and support you and taking over relevant tasks to buy out your time in the end. Yeah, that is very, very big challenge, especially one very often seen mistake and characteristic within organizations is, no matter the size and scope, is micromanagement. It's a topic on its own, but that is the problem. Give the scepter of power to somebody else who can help and support you, and kill the squatting micromanager in yourself, because we all had that character and that portion in us. The point is to remove it, because that is the only way you can go down the road and finish your work, deliver the project, get the desired state, generate wanted results, and be in the comfortable place you want to be sitting in. Everything else is wrong.
I agree. Yeah.
I try to tell people I no longer pinch pennies in an effort to spend the minutes myself. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No, and talking about something that you said, Philip, I remember back when I was in corporate, that whole micromanagement piece that reminded me. I had, like you said, I went through that phase as well, especially in the beginning of my career in corporate. That was one of the challenges, was that, I wanted everything to be as fine-tuned as possible, because you start to feel like once you start to ascend and you start to have more responsibility, you understand that a lot of what your team does falls on you. Even if it's right, if it's dumb, it's you. Like, they do something right, it's you. They do something wrong, it's you. It's not them. So I kind of took that seriously, but then it was a lesson, because one time one of the employees let me know, like, hey, I feel uncomfortable because I feel like you're always over my shoulder. And that was my first confrontation with micromanagement, understanding, well, if I want this to flow and I want my team to build up their skills and do things right, I have to trust them. It has to start with me giving them the right direction and then trusting them to follow the direction. And then when they don't, maybe they make an error, then we go over it together, see what happened, and then push forward from there, and then allow them again to give it another try. Because then I think within that trust, you start to build sort of a culture within the team. And then that also leads to that openness of them. I think you mentioned it briefly, Conrad, of them being able to find better solutions than what you may have proposed, because they have the confidence to, that you're not there on top of them. So they're like, well, okay, I'm doing it, but maybe, wait a second, I've been doing it like this, but I figured that, oh, wait a second, this step, we could actually eliminate it by doing this, and it's quicker this way. And then they're open to share that with you as the leader. And now it's sort of this way where, as a team, you start to actually optimize and actually promote optimization from within the team. And it's not just one person looking at it. Now you have, like, well, if you have a team of 3, well, now you have yourself and 3 other people that are open and looking to improve. And if they have that trust, they feel that you have that trust in them, it makes it a lot more easier for you to fine tune the processes. And it makes it a lot more easier to delegate as well, because then I think a lot of delegation falls on the entrepreneur trusting the process and trusting the people that they have. Because you could delegate all you want, but if you don't trust the people that you're putting into those positions, they're going to feel that. And then it's going to be counterproductive in the long term, because then they're going to feel uncomfortable. And I experimented that, luckily, when I was in corporate, and that was a big lesson that I brought with me into business since that point. So luckily, I was able to learn it when I was managing somebody else's business and not my own, which is, I think, one of the big advantages of the corporate world, even though I know there's some challenges within that world as well that I wouldn't agree with, but it did come with a lot of great lessons as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Conrad, you wanted to say something, maybe some final words and suggestions to the audience. Why not?
Yeah, I want to share that I think we all have a time management problem. There are a lot of ways that I've come to look at that situation for our health and wealth and self-awareness as a society.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest challenge we have today is we have to, on the one end, feel totally okay in our ambitions and our pursuits around what we want to get accomplished and how we want to make the most of our time. At the same time, we have to sort of adopt this sort of Eastern philosophical Zen of what we have right now is enough. What we're doing at this point in time is the best that we possibly can, given the knowledge and expertise that we have. We have to operate on this duality of there's always more to learn, and I understand that. So there's just this pursuit of more amidst this self-realization of what I have right now is enough. And that can seem really tough depending on your situation. I feel very privileged and blessed and grateful for the things that I have that let me feel that way. And it's ironic because even when I did have these things in the past, I didn't always feel this way. So there's something to be said about that. Granted, I don't come from such a situation of extreme poverty, or I don't have such destitution in my life that I could truly argue that I don't have the basic necessities to sustain. It's a totally different conversation, and maybe one that I think as well goes back to this issue of we have a time management problem. It's not just an individual issue; it's a societal one. Forgive me if this goes a little bit beyond scope, but when we think about what it means for us to make the most of our time, to what we talked about before we started recording, Giovanni and Filip, this realm of empathy towards others, this realm of understanding of like, we're all in this experience together and we're all quote unquote running out of time. So what's going to make that experience better for you amidst everybody else? How are you going to save everybody else's time? How is everybody going to help you save your time? Kind of provide that openness, be more aware of what's out there. And in the meantime, just be well, like take care of yourself, do the things that you got to do to treat yourself right. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. I agree.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you,
nothing to
Conrad.
add, at least from my end, Gio.
No, yeah, I appreciate you, Conrad, for coming on, speaking with us today on this very important topic of time management. I think we can all agree that time is probably one of the top, right? I would say for some people it is the top resource, right? Because it's one of those things you can't really get back at the end of the day. You can't buy it back even if you wanted to. You can't reverse, right? You can't.
Be careful. There's some crazy people out there. There's one dude spending like $2 million a year trying to like keep his age at like the body of a 20-year-old. And then
I've heard of that.
If they discover immortality, that's it. We're done. Everyone's just
crazy.
Lobsters. And I don't know. I totally different conversation around that philosophy, but
but for now, it's in this point where it's still right. We haven't been able to confirm it yet, but yeah, I think that would be crazy. Especially when we're talking about like freezing your like this whole altered carbon theory, right? I don't know if you've seen that show Altered Carbon on Netflix.
Oh,
Very interesting.
yeah.
Like you freeze your memory, you have your memories, and then your memories just get transferred over to new bodies. Right. That's like we're going very far out. So for some of you guys, but that's basically sort of similar to what you're saying, Conrad. It's another way I've heard of people. I mean, that's similar to what Elon with the whole Neuralink and everything he wants to do with like connecting to your brain. It's like, well, I think something similar. You could just download like your memories, and then what can stop you from then not continuing living? Because really, we are like our memories and our experiences. That's what makes us who we are. So if we're able to like find a way to transfer that, it's like you said, it's crazy, because then this is just a vessel at the end of the day. But what really makes you who you are, I think, is right in here inside of you. But then there's a lot of interesting aspects there, because then you get into a lot of other conversations of like, well, what about the soul, and what about all these other different aspects of it? And so that's an interesting conversation, though.
The constraints of death and our time the finiteness of our time, and how that applies the meaning behind the way we make decisions. I mean, you can't. I think beyond the fact that the people who are going to be immortal first are going to be probably the people I don't want to be immortal first. That's the first issue I have. But the second issue I have is that death is meaning. None of this matters if we could live forever. You can infinitely delay issues if there's always going to be tomorrow. So part of the running out of time issue is a good and a bad. It's a paradox, but a whole other conversation.
Yeah, a whole other conversation, but a very interesting one. Like you said, it's a whole different conversation, but a very, very interesting one. But thank you, Conrad, for coming out with us, talking about your thoughts on time management and awareness, which I think is very important. So appreciate you. Thank you for coming out with me and Philip. That's all for today. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, hit the like button and give us any comments, what your thoughts are on time management, things you may have experienced as a founder, as a consultant, or even as a person who maybe is in corporate, right, in a specific position, and you've learned some things along the way. Let us know what your thoughts are on what we've talked about. And if you want to add something on, go ahead and let us know in the comments. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Conrad. Thank you, Gio. And yeah, catching up soon then. See you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.